Good evening, everybody. I'm Chad Rains, the founder of the Bronx Bomber blog. This is podcast number 2. I am joined by Greg Wilson. Greg, take it away.
I'm Greg Wilson. That's me. I've been writing for a little bit. We're gonna talk about Gary Sanchez and the bullpen here, and this right here, this other guy is Bryan Peng, better known as Bread.
But
Yeah,
first,
go ahead.
let's give Greg a round of applause for that introduction. All right, Brian, you're up.
Hey everyone, my name is Bryan Peng. I've been writing since late June. You'll probably have read me because I usually write all the game recaps. And happy to be here and talking to Chad and Greg today about Gary Sanchez as well as the bullpen.
Okay, so to get started, we're gonna talk about Gary Sanchez, as they mentioned. This is a guy who we all knew as the top prospect going into the 2014 season. He was the top prospect. He's always been a big name in the farm, and then he kind of disappeared. His production lacked, and he's been called lazy. But he's finally this year, 2015. He had a great season in AA, promoted to AAA, and now in the Arizona Fall League. At the moment, he's hitting 328. He's got 6 home runs in 14 games, so he's obviously raking. He's one of the top hitters. What do you guys think about Gary Sanchez? What do you think his role is going to be next season? And go ahead, Greg.
I mean, I wrote that article about Gary Sanchez just like about a week or two ago, and I mean, I'm a big Gary Sanchez fan. Not so much a Brian McCann fan lately because I mean I put some of his stats in there from the past few years, and these past few years have really been his worst few years. And I mean, it's just a trend you see in like all catchers. It's not just him. It's because catching it just wears you out, And Brian McCann's kind of getting to that age where he's not going to produce as well as he did before. So I mean, maybe, hopefully, we see Gary Sanchez maybe on the roster next season. If Brian McCann can't produce, and maybe give Gary Sanchez a few games, kind of give Brian McCann a wake-up call, maybe. And if Gary Sanchez does well in that spot, then we have a catcher there, if need be,
Yeah, I think we can talk about how Gary Sanchez looks like what Greg Bird did a couple years ago in the Fall League, but I think for starting next year in April, it's going to be McCann starting, and then it's going to be John Ryan Murphy backing him up. I'm not sure if Sanchez is going to play a role like Bird did. I don't want to count that and say if Brian McCann were to get seriously hurt and be out for the rest of the year, then Sanchez would come up as a backup and play behind Murphy. But at the same time, that is going to be the case if something does happen to either McCann or Murphy. I still think Sanchez is a year away. He still needs a year in the minors. And I think Murphy is a good backup. We've seen this year that he does well when he's put into games. He's had multi-hit games. Even though he doesn't hit for power, he does hit for average, and he's a serviceable backup when McCann needs rest.
I think John Ryan's a very good backup catcher. I think he's kind of like a Francisco Cervelli. He's a valuable guy, hits for a good average, not much power, and he plays good defense. So I think, much like Cervelli, if you had to move John Ryan Murphy to make room for Sanchez, you could always do that. Or, Sanchez, his stock's rising again. I think he'll be in the top 100 in MLB.com's prospect list this year. So he's going to get more attention again. He's always trade bait for the next season, or this offseason. So, much like you mentioned Greg Bird last year in the Arizona Fall League, Greg Bird, I mean, we had heard of Greg Bird. He was making a name for himself already, but then in the Fall League, he really shined. He hit 313. He hit 6 home runs, and that was in 26 games. Those numbers are, as I mentioned earlier, very similar to what Gary Sanchez is doing. So, you maybe garner more attention with your production in the Fall League, and then, Greg Bird wasn't called up until the late summer. So, and he had a big role on the team. That was, of course, after Tex got hurt. So I think Gary Sanchez would be an injury away, but he's definitely getting more attention. I think he's getting really close to becoming a major league player, and whether it's for the Yankees or not, that's the question for me.
Yeah, you're right. I think he definitely is some really nice trade bait. I think there are a few teams that will definitely go after him. Maybe we get maybe some relief pitching out of that. And I mean that's something that we need because other than Andrew Miller and Dylan Betances and Justin Wilson, those three are really the three main ones. But I mean, yeah, Gary Sanchez is. I think personally, I think he is one that we should keep. I know a lot of people wouldn't agree with me, but I see a really good everyday catcher in Gary Sanchez for the future.
Yeah, for me, it's hard to compare Bird, I guess, to Sanchez is because, when Bird replaced Mark Short, it wasn't going to happen, even if Bird, hit like 10 home runs or whatever, just because, Bird's defense you can't compare that to unparalleled. And we also had towards the end of the year, he couldn't save all the errors that Chase Headley was making from third. So I guess for me, I'd have to see Gary Sanchez play, perhaps in spring training in the upcoming spring to see whether or not his defense could be at the level of McCann or even Murphy.
Well, that's his biggest hole, as people say. He's a lazy catcher. He's
right, exactly.
Defensively, he's not going to be able to catch in the major leagues because he's just not a great defender. So, but he's definitely got the bat, he's got the stick to be able to hit the ball out of the yard, hit a bunch of doubles, high slugging. You don't really know how high of a batting average he's going to have, but I think, like I said, he's making a name for himself once again. He's kind of getting more attention, and I think he's close. Speaking of Greg Bird, I think we can move on to him for the 2016 season. Greg Bird was a guy who he was on the radar. He was coming up. He had a great year in AA, and then in AAA he kept improving. So when Teixeira went down with an injury, Greg Bird's name was the first one to be called, and he played well enough to definitely be considered to be on the opening day roster in 2016, but with Mark Teixeira coming back, I don't think you can put Greg Bird on that opening day roster. So what are you guys' thoughts on that?
Well, I think that Greg Bird should be on the roster, not initially as a starter, but I think, Teixeira's age, he's going to get worn out sometimes. I mean, like Scott, I'm not really worried about his injury because, his injury this year is like a freak thing. He fouled a ball off his leg. He can't do anything about that. But, I mean, Teixeira, he's going to get worn out. He's getting older. So, when Teixeira needs rest or something, just put Greg Bird in there. And if Alex Rodriguez, if he doesn't perform, then maybe DH Greg Bird.
Yeah, for me, I don't see Bird starting in the majors in 2015. I don't like...
2016.
2016, sorry, yeah, 2016. So I'd like to see him called up at some point during the year, especially if maybe someone struggles. Brendan Ryan, being that he picked up his option, so there probably aren't enough, roster spots for Bird to come up. He's probably like the first man out. So for me, I'd love to see him improve on his mechanics in the minors, and then when he comes up, I'm sure he'll be a big influence in the Yankees offense.
And like you were saying, you're not sure if he's going to start on the opening day roster.
I don't think he will.
And then Greg mentioned you could DH him, and that's just the only problem is that you've got a bunch of guys on this Yankee team that would be designated hitters on other teams. You got Beltran in right field. He had a lot of clutch this year. He hit very well for this team, much improved. But just defensively, he's not going to get it done. So in an ideal world, you'd like to see him get more starts at designated hitter, but that all depends on Alex Rodriguez, whether he's performing or not, because he's getting paid $20+ million, so they're going to put him on the field first, and then so it's going to be hard for Greg Bird to see some starts at designated hitter unless someone goes down or unless you find a way to move Beltran, which probably isn't very realistic. So Greg Bird's definitely a tricky situation for the 2016 season.
Yeah, for the immediate future, I don't see Bird playing DH. I see if he plays, he's playing first, and that's because you have A-Rod for the first choice for DH, and you have Carlos Beltran if Chris Young starts in right for him. And neither of them are going to be moved by the start of next year. There's no way it's going to happen. So I just don't see Bird starting in the majors. That's my reasoning for that. And there are plenty of options to play designated hitter. Even I even put Brian McCann ahead of Bird at DH. If Murphy were to get a start at catching, at catcher. So there's just not enough spots. There's too many, I guess, veteran players for that I would put ahead of Bird at this point right now, anyways, at the DH.
And then you mentioned Chris Young. That's all barring they re-sign him, which
That's right, actually.
Personally, I don't see them bringing Chris Young back. I think he's a very useful player. He hits well against lefties, but I don't see a need for Chris Young when you've got Heathcott, you've got Mason Williams, you've got these younger guys that could step in. I don't know. I don't see Chris Young coming back.
Yeah, my question with that is that unless we were to get Cespedes, which is unlikely, or Justin Upton, which is more likely, the Yankees still lack a right-handed power bat other than A-Rod. So, you talk about Heathcott and Mason Williams, they're both lefties, so you're still lacking that. If pitchers start lefty like Dallas Keuchel of Houston, the Yankees are screwed. Yankees don't have enough right-handed bats to counter Keuchel or other dominant left-handed pitchers.
On that subject, I don't personally think that signing Chris Young is the best idea, but if, say, I would like to see Aaron Judge up to see how well he can produce as soon as possible. I know he needs a little more time in the minors, like maybe at the beginning of the season, and possibly give him a chance during in the summer around when Greg Bird came up. And I think if Aaron Judge can give us a spot in the outfield, I don't think there's any need for Chris Young out there because that's a power right-handed bat that we have out there. But again, it's he is a prospect. You can never be sure how well he will do there.
So yeah, I think on the topic of Aaron Judge, I think Judgment Day is coming, but I see him more as a potential September call-up because he's still got some developing to do. I'm just as high on Aaron Judge as the next person, but from every. All right, from everything I've heard, he's got to adjust. He's got to work on hitting off-speed pitches. So I don't think Aaron Judge is ready to be on the roster opening day, which is which does present an obvious hole in the outfield. You're going to have, presumably, unless Gardner's moved, you're going to have Gardner, Ellsbury, and Beltran starting out there, and then your fourth outfielder. Like I said, it could be Heathcott, it could be Williams. It also, it could be. You could say Ackley is your fourth outfielder, but that's where the hole is, and that's where you could. There's a lot of options, but I don't think Aaron Judge will fill that void until at least the midsummer, and realistically, I see him as a September call-up kind of guy.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, go ahead, Greg. Sorry.
I agree. He definitely shouldn't be on the opening day roster. Unless they see something in spring training that is just he completely turned around and he can hit the breaking ball really well. But I think there's not a high chance of that. I think he'll definitely, if he comes up this season, it won't be early on.
Yeah, I think we've talked about that enough. So let's transition on to the bullpen. So Chad, do you want to take it away from here?
All right, so I guess in the Yankees bullpen in 2016, you've got the sure thing. You've got Andrew Miller, Dylan Betances, and you've got Justin Wilson. And then from there, it gets a little shaky. You've got Chase and Shreve, who had an excellent first half. He was personally, outside of Betances and Miller, he was my favorite reliever in the first half, just because he was lights out. I always tweeted from the BBB account that he was money, and he would just come in, he would get his job done, and then he'd hand it over to Wilson or Betances, and then to Miller. He's just a bridge. But in the second half, he struggled. I'm gonna pull up his numbers, just his splits from the first half and the second half. But I know in the second half he was not the same pitcher, and so you're not. There has been rumors that possibly you could move him this offseason. I don't see it, and I don't think that'd be a good option. And then you've also got Adam Warren, which will be. He's always a question mark. You know what you're going to get with him. He's a solid pitcher, but you don't know whether he's going to be in the rotation, whether he's going to be in the bullpen. He wants to be in the rotation. He said that he was a starter in college. He was a starter in the minors, and then it just didn't work out in the major leagues. But he's he's definitely pitched well enough to be a starting pitcher, but his whole resume as a major leaguer has been predominantly from the bullpen. So outside of those five, then you've got the minor league revolving door. So, padding the bullpen this offseason, I think, should definitely be a priority, maybe to get another reliable arm out there.
Yeah, for me, Darren O'Day pops up as a really, really solid name that I think the Yankees could sign. The Yankees, I think, you have Shreve and Wilson as both lefties, and yes, they can get both righties out, but Wilson, I believe, is a right-handed specialist, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, left-handed, yeah.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
I mean,
yeah, go ahead.
He's gonna get out. He's gonna get lefties and righties out, but I mean, just like any other left-hander, he's gonna get lefties out at a higher rate than he does right-handed batters. But I think he's gonna.
I'm talking about Darren O'Day.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think he's a solid name that we picked up. I don't know how expensive his signing him could be, but if you put him as a middle reliever, in around the same level as Shreve and Justin Wilson, I think he would be a really good asset for the Yankees to have.
I mean, yeah, I agree. Darren O'Day, that is a pretty solid option with his delivery and everything. That's tough to hit.
Yeah.
And about the Yankees bullpen, yeah, I mean, early on in the year, we'd get into the sixth inning, and if the starting pitcher was done, and the Yankees were up, that early in the year, that game was pretty much over because you had Shreve, you had Wilson, you had Betances and Miller. They were all pretty much lights out in the beginning of the season. I mean, how many games did it take for Andrew Miller and Dylan Betances to even give up an earned run?
It was May.
June. It was end of June. Yeah.
It was a long time before they even gave up a run. Early in the season, the bullpen was lights out, and I mean, but later in the season, Shreve fell off. Wilson, Betances, and Miller pretty much kept up what they were doing. Not as good, obviously, but still, they did really good in the second half of this, really well in the second half of the season.
So you look at Shreve's numbers in the first half. He was 6-1 with a 2.02 ERA in 32 games. That is absolutely exceptional.
That was great. He was great the first half.
His name was even thrown into potentially being on the American League All-Star team. He was definitely one of the better relievers in the game in the first half, and then in the second half, he went 0-1 ERA 4.2 or 7.6 in 27 games. So, clearly not the same pitcher in the second half, and that was partially due to some really bad innings that he had where he just kind of blew up and gave up 3 earned or 4 earned. But he just wasn't consistently getting batters out in the second half.
I mean, I saw something. It was about Chase and Shreve. He was having confidence issues, and and I mean, baseball is it's a huge mental game, and that can really be the difference maker. Whether you have a first half like Chase and Shreve did or a second half like he did.
Yeah, if I had to put a pecking order for the bullpen, I'd put obviously Miller, Betances 8, 9, and then I would put Wilson. I would put Warren and Wilson sort of in a seventh inning role. I don't know. For me, Wilson was really good, especially later on when he had to go maybe 2 innings, and he would be pretty good in getting hitters out. I want to see more out of Shreve before I put him back in key situations. I guess in the end, when Girardi started putting in Wilson, when Girardi put Wilson in instead of Shreve in those seventh inning spots, and then I think as a fan myself, I started doubting him because Shreve was much better than Wilson early on in the year, but then I guess things switched, so maybe Girardi saw something that we didn't. So for me, Wilson's still a seventh inning guy, and I put Warren with him to alternate days, maybe even put Warren as a substitute for Dylan Betances if Betances pitches more than 2 or 3 days in a row, because his arm I'm scared his arm is going to fall off sometime, and then also just his walks is an issue that I hope he can address over the offseason.
And then the name that we can't forget about is Jacob Lindgren. He's going to come back in 2016. He went down with an arm injury, unfortunately ended his season really shortly after being called up, and I think he might have been called up prematurely in 2015. He didn't seem ready for the big league level, and he was leaving pitches over the middle of the plate, particularly in the Oakland Athletics series. He was giving up late home runs, and he to me, he didn't look ready. But I think this is a guy who could potentially be a very valuable piece, a left-handed. I don't know if I don't want to call him a left-handed specialist, but he's going to strike out a ton of guys. He's going to strike out batters at the same rate as Dellin Betances, and then he's just not going to pitch as often. So they call him the strikeout factor in the minor leagues, and I look for him to step into a key role in 2016. I think he'll be on the opening day roster, and I think he'll be a key piece for the bullpen.
Yeah, James Pazos, I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name. I've read about him, and I think he's someone that could potentially be on the opening day roster. I've heard really good things about him, especially towards the end of this year, where he pitched 5 shutout innings in 11 games, especially after he was called up in September. So he could potentially be sort of a role that he would stay in New York and not move back and forth between Scranton and New York, because I think that revolving bullpen did hurt the Yankees because the relievers weren't able to get a solid rhythm down when moving back and forth. So I look for Pazos to hopefully start the year in New York and hopefully provide a good sort of relief especially when the Yankees are losing.
But do you take James Pazos? Do you take him over Jacob Lindgren, because they're both left-handed arms, and Lindgren's a higher touted prospect? So
I'm not sure. I have to see Lindgren, how he performs during spring training. How he recovers from that arm injury. For now, I would say I would put Pazos over Lindgren, especially since Lindgren is still rehabbing.
Okay, all right. Go ahead. Do you have any thoughts on this, Greg?
Not really. Pretty much, you guys pretty much said it all.
All right. Moving on. More arms in the bullpen. I know at the trade deadline there was a lot of speculation that the Yankees could be perhaps making a package deal and bringing in Craig Kimbrell, and that's a deal that I salivate over. You look at Craig Kimbrell, and you've got Andrew Miller, who won the Mariano Rivera Award for the best reliever in the American League. So do you need Craig Kimbrell? Well, no, you don't need him, but if you can get Craig Kimbrell, you go get Craig Kimbrell, because then you're talking about a 6-inning game with a bridge of probably Betances in the 7th, Miller in the 8th, and then Kimbrell in the 9th. It'd be very hard to move Miller out of the 9th inning, but it's also hard to bring Kimbrell in and say, sorry, Kimbrell, you're going to pitch in the 8th from now on. And I think with a lefty-righty matchup of Miller and Betances, you can mix and match a little bit better. And Kimbrell he would help the bullpen astronomically and fill a bunch of holes.
Definitely. And putting Andrew Miller, he wasn't even a closer until this season, obviously, and I think moving him back to the 8th inning will really help it out, because you don't have to rely on going to Dellin in the 8th and Andrew Miller in the 9th every single night. You can have Dellin in the 8th or Andrew Miller in the 8th, and then go to Kimbrell in the 9th, and that'll be a really nice combination to have.
So yeah, definitely unlikely, but it pats the bullpen, and it'd be a good move in my mind. Brian, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I don't know if the Padres would be willing to deal him again. Now the offseason. If I had known the deal, I would have totally written even an article about how Mateo was totally worth giving up for Craig Kimbrell. Mateo is still 2 or 3 years away. I still don't know how his bat is gonna be. We talk about his speed, but if you don't get on base, there's no point in the speed.
I think.
Go ahead, Greg.
I think Mateo could be a really nice addition in a couple of years when he is ready, and if he is good enough to be a major league player. We were talking about it the other day. Maybe put him at second base, and with Didi at short, if he can keep producing like he did the second half of the season, and Jorge Mateo proves to be as good as everyone thinks he's going to be, then I think Didi is short and Mateo is second. That's a really good combination in the middle infield.
And then we can talk about one final thing before we wrap this up. Since we're talking about Jorge Mateo, we can talk about Didi Gregorius. I know I'm working on a piece right now where I've always said this about Didi. In my mind, bringing Didi in this for 2015, that was a one-year experiment. And I always said, if it didn't work out, you were going to go after Ian Desmond, or you were going to go after Asdrubal Cabrera, a shortstop on the market. But I think Didi played well enough in his first year in pinstripes he kind of earned another season, another go-around in pinstripes.
for me, Didi played exceptionally well, especially taking over, in shortstop in New York. That was never an easy task. So I trust him for the next year, especially to start shortstop. I think, his defense was much improved after June, July. So I think if Didi were to just get his bat around, maybe have a few more clutch moments, boost his confidence in key situations, he could be a real asset for the Yankees, especially in the infield. In the infield, he's probably number 2, and you have to share, and then you have Didi. Chase Headley is still a question at third base, and then second base, you have no idea what's going to happen with Rob Refsnyder and Dustin Ackley splitting time. So if Didi could get a good start next year, I think that'll boost the Yankees' confidence and their offense too.
Yeah, I mean, Didi definitely outplayed what I thought he was going to be like this year in the second half. Early in the year, he had a lot of trouble on defense, but he really improved that. At Alex Rodriguez, he worked with him at short and everything, and that definitely got a lot better.
Yeah,
that was a big thing to see for me.
I was looking at his splits in the first and second half. First half he hit 238, and then in the second half he was a different player. He hit 294, 5 home runs, 37 RBIs. So, and the biggest problem with him, again, you guys mentioned it, hitting with runners in scoring position. With runners in scoring position, he only hit 250, and runners in scoring position with 2 outs, he hit 167.
There you go. That's what I was looking for.
And that was always my problem with him, is that every time we needed a hit from him, 2 outs, there was a runner on second, there was a runner on third. If he came up, you thought the inning was over. You had no confidence in this kid, and that's what I think. His second year in pinstripes, in the big market that he's not used to playing in. I think in his second year, he's had a year of exposure to that pressure, and I think I'm looking at him to improve even more so than he did already in 2015. He improved a lot from the first half to the second half, and then and from year 1 to year 2, I look for the improvement to be astronomical improvement, and he's not going to be a superstar. He's not gonna hit 300, but if he could hit 270, he could hit 15 home runs, and again compete for a Gold Glove. I think that's a good investment that you got out of Didi for a year or 2 or 3 years until Jorge Mateo is ready, maybe to take the reins, or move Mateo to second base if Didi does develop into a great player. Anybody?
Greg, anything else to add before we end this?
Nope.
All right. We can just conclude with some thoughts about the World Series just quickly. I guess we have 5 minutes till the top of the hour. Just talk about what you guys thought of the ending of the World Series. Greg, do you want to go ahead and go first?
Well, I mean, I was definitely glad to see the Royals win. I would like to see it go 7 games because you always want to see more baseball, but it was really good. It was really good to see the Royals. I mean, they're a great late inning baseball team. They're always going after it, and they never, no matter what happens earlier in the game, they're always going after it, and they never give up. I mean, you saw it in Game 5, obviously. Well, throughout the entire playoffs, and this isn't the only situation, but in Game 5, Hosmer, when he ran on that ball that Duda overthrew, that on the ground ball to David Wright. I mean, that definitely showed how the Royals played all postseason and all year, and that's really what I think made them great. They wanted to win, and they were always trying to win, no matter what they needed to do. They did it.
And that's my thing with the Royals is they were, without a doubt in my mind, they were the best team in baseball this year, and obviously they won the World Series, so that's easy for me to say they were the best team in baseball, but top to bottom, there was not a better lineup in baseball, 1 through 9. You look at the Royals lineup and you can say perhaps they didn't have a superstar. Lorenzo Cain has developed himself into a superstar. Eric Hosmer is becoming a superstar. So they've got a lot of all-star players, and they're developing superstars. But I think top to bottom, they had Rios, they had Gordon. And the bench was obviously deep with Orlando, and Colon got that big hit in Game 5. I think this team they were just gritty. They played hard, and they went after it. And they, in my mind, they just never quit. You never felt like they were out of a game, and that's the biggest thing. And that's due to their bullpen being so good, in the late innings, you felt like if you could get it to the 7th inning, the bullpen wasn't going to allow a run, and then it was just a matter of time before they would come back and win the game. And I think you saw that in the World Series.
They're an extremely resilient team. They're exactly what I hope the Yankees, would look like next year when they're down a couple runs. Dude, I don't think anybody on the Yankees would have tried doing what Hosmer did in Game 5 in the 9th inning.
And
do that.
My thing with that is everybody like applauds him for great base running. I don't personally think it was great base running. I think it was an aggressive play that he had to make. And being up 3-1 in the series, I think you have room for error. So I think Hosmer trying to score on that, he had to do that, and that was a good play because if you lose the game, it is a demoralizing loss, but you go back and you get him in Game 6. So I think Hosmer running home on that ground ball, I don't think it was good base running, but I think it was aggressive. I think he had to do it, and it paid off. So
absolutely, there was, even if the throw was online, I don't think he would have been out. He slid in as the throw came in, so I'm not sure if he would have been out, even if the throw had been online.
I actually disagree with that.
I do as well.
Yeah, I thought it didn't even have to be a great throw. I thought any throw like in the general area that the catcher could reach without taking a step to the left or right or jumping up. I thought any throw like anywhere around that area really could have got him out because even Hosmer didn't even get in until like after the ball even hit the backstop. Didn't he?
I don't know. I only saw it live, so I'm only going off that.
But you look at the stereotype of first baseman. They're power hitting guys. They're not great fielders, and typically they can't really throw that well. That's why they're playing first base. So I think it wasn't great base running, like I said, but it was an aggressive play. He had to do it, and at the situation, it just happened to work out for him, and it worked out. It just felt like every ball rolled the Royals' way all season long.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Hosmer was talking about it after the game. He said he was just going to be aggressive over at third base because he knew how David Wright fields the ball. He fields it and he shuffles a few times before he throws it to first. So he said he was going to shuffle with David Wright and see how aggressive he could be on that, and he really took advantage of that. David Wright never even looked. He never even really gave him that much of a look over there. He never even threatened to like look Hosmer back, and it was definitely aggressive. Aggressiveness, that's what wins games. That you force the other team to make the plays that they need to make, and when it comes down to it, the Mets did nothing against the Mets. The Mets were a great team. They did phenomenal this year. Their pitching, it's tough. It's like they've got another one or two pitcher coming to the mound every single night.
Mm-hmm.
With Harvey, DeGrom, Syndergaard, and Zach Wheeler, who was hurt at the end of the year. All that. That's tough to hit. And the Royals did it.
I think you're exactly right. The Mets are going to be back next year. I think the Royals, I expect them to be back next year. I think we're going to wrap this up. I miss baseball. I want it to come back, but
yeah. Every 2 days, Chad will tweet something. Get me Yankees baseball. So
basically, my daily tweet.
It's a long time away. Too. Yeah.
Just over 100 days away until pitchers and catchers report.
About 150 till opening day. We're getting there.
All right. Well, again, from the Bronx Bomber Vlog, I am Chad Rains.
I'm Greg Wilson.
I'm Bryan Peng, and thank you all for tuning in to the second edition of the Bronx Bomber Vlog podcast, and we'll see you all next time.